Hello everyone. Welcome to the National Technology Day celebrations at IIT Jodhpur. I'm Raj Lakshmi and I'll be moderating this event today. And we hope our students watching us at home are safe and healthy. May 11th, 1998 was the day when India achieved a major technological breakthrough by successfully carrying out nuclear tests at Pokhran, Rajasthan. The tests were conducted under the leadership of then Prime Minister Shri Vajpayee and was executed by a team of brilliant scientists such as Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam and Dr. R. Chidambaram, who is now the chairman of IIT Jodhpur's Board of Governors. An expert team of scientists masterminded Operation Shakti and evaded detection by American surveillance. This day marks a milestone in our technical advancement as it marked India's arrival on the world's nuclear stage. In today's difficult times, this day has a special significance as it celebrates everyone who's leveraging technology to bring a positive difference in the life of others. The fraternity of IIT Jodhpur has taken remarkable initiatives during these trying times of the COVID-19 global pandemic. We applaud all the teams such as those of Professor Nirmal Rana and Professor Kaushal Desai, who have successfully delivered hand sanitizers and face shields. Many other teams have been working tirelessly on developing systems to decontaminate N95 masks, in making AI-driven diagnostics using X-ray and CT images of lungs, and a Hindi chatbot to provide diagnostic guidance. Today, we have a panel of 4 such speakers who would be sharing the contributions of their respective teams. We have Professor P.K. Tiwari, visiting professor and head of the Department of Chemical Engineering. He will be talking about water-related issues during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly the challenges and opportunities. We also have Professor Ram Prakash from the Department of Physics, who would be talking about photocatalytic oxidation sterilization system that they've developed to treat the N95 face mask respirators used by healthcare workers so that they may be reused. We have Dr. Sumit Kalra from the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, who will be talking about next generation smart telemedicine portal for scalable and contactless healthcare services. We also have Professor Mayank Vats from the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, who would be talking about the AI-based technology intervention from their team during this pandemic. I welcome all the panelists, and we will start with the first talk. I request Professor Tiwari to please virtually take the dais. Professor Tiwari.
Because of my background in Department of Atomic Energy and Bhabha Atomic Research Center, May 11, 1998 is very special to me. The nation has demonstrated the power of technology for the nation's security. World has changed since last few months because of COVID-19. And COVID-19 pandemic has created additional requirement of water. For protection against virus, hand washing with soap at regular intervals is uppermost on the agenda. Today we require about 15 liters of water, additional water, for washing our hands 4 to 5 times a day. So this is the 15 liters of daily requirement of water per household. We also need frequent washing of floors and commonly used spaces. So there is additional per capita water requirement both in household and industries. There are newspaper reports, this cutting what you have put up is with respect to Jodhpur. 2 days back it appeared in newspaper and mentions that during the lockdown, the level of water in the water bodies is going down and coming to an alarming level. And reason they mention, cause they mention is Corona. So this COVID-19 has also added more contaminants in water due to the use of additional detergents, due to the use of additional disinfectants, the chemicals for sanitizing the hands. So new contaminants, additional contaminants are added. So this one is like requirement of water has increased, so we need more water. Other part is we generate more of wastewater, and the quality of wastewater also has gone down and is going down day by day. So there are three challenges: requirement of more water, and additional load of disinfectants in the wastewater treatment system, or also the additional detergent in the wastewater treatment systems. So question arises from where this water will come from, the new water, the additional water that we require, and the treatment of the wastewater, where new contaminants, additional contaminants are added. And what about the hygiene in the places which are water scarce regions? For example, Rajasthan, we have 10% of the land of the country area wise and only 2% of the water resources. Challenges are also unique to the rural and remote areas where infrastructure is an issue, where electricity is an issue, even if electricity is available, how much time it is available, these are the issues. But when there are challenges, also there are opportunities. And opportunities are that technology will play an important role in dealing with the induced effects of COVID-19. Also, there is need for lab to land technologies. There is greater need for robust and affordable water technologies. Development in a direction where it can be robust and affordable, and can there be decentralized unit so that the cost of operating, cost of manpower can be reduced, can be minimized, and can be operated by the custodian of the unit, by the household. There is also greater need for water recycle and reuse, reusing the water. After it is used, treat it and reuse it. And water technologies affordable for rural areas and remote areas, acceptable to rural and remote areas. So these are the opportunities which are now, because of COVID-19, have come. Membrane processes will play an important role in this. But when we talk of membrane processes, it is not only RO, reverse osmosis. There are several other membrane processes also, like microfiltration, MF. It reduces the suspended solids. It can filter out the suspended solids. Ultrafiltration can remove the bacteria, virus, microorganism. Nanofiltration, NF, can remove the multivalent ions. And reverse osmosis can remove the monovalent ions. The energy requirement for microfiltration is least, and it increases for ultrafiltration, nanofiltration, and higher for reverse osmosis. So development of right kind of technology for the particular requirement and the selection of the technology has become more important. IIT Jodhpur is involved in scientific social responsibility, and we have set up quite a few units in the rural areas, particularly Sirohi district and Jhunjhunu district. There the water contamination was existing, like fluoride contamination is quite prevalent. The turbidity in water, suspended solids in water. So we have set up the membrane-based units in the schools. Government Primary School of Khadak village, that is Rajki Prathmik Vidyalaya of Khadat Gaon, Sirohi. We have also set up water purification unit in Dhanuri village of Sirohi district for providing clean water, and also in government secondary school of Luna village in Jhunjhunu district. These units, they remove not only the fluoride and give the right kind of water, it also removes turbidity, microorganism, bacteria, virus. It removes the color and odor and provides clean drinking water to the children. So risk of waterborne disease has been minimized, which is about 70% of the diseases. 70% of the disease are waterborne diseases. And this has been set up through the local participation. And if you see the slide on the left top of the, you see the principal of the school, primary school, and there are two young chaps standing there. They said they are very much interested and they participated in the installation part. And you also see our IIT Jodhpur students here, might have seen in the campus, and the staff members of the school. So they put up the unit, water purification units. So we put up the unit through the local participation, which leads to capacity building, awareness program. Now young chaps, young students, they have been trained to open the unit and clean the unit. We are planning, IIT Jodhpur is planning to set up about 50 such water purification units in different schools in the Rajasthan, particularly in the rural areas. We are also planning to develop membrane-based, decentralized membrane-based post-COVID-19 grey water treatment unit. That is treating the grey water which comes out from the kitchen or bathroom, and treat that water, can it be made reusable, taking into account the contamination post-COVID-19, the different kinds of detergents nowadays being used, different kinds of disinfectants, the sanitizers. So taking into account those post-COVID grey water, with coarse filtration, fine filtration, and membrane-based water treatment, get the treated water for reuse. And this is one of the proposed proposal. Also, there is more need now for water recycle and reuse, particularly in the industries. Industries normally they follow conventional effluent treatment plant and treat the effluent to get the discharge for the as per environmental norms. But with the technology, it is possible to reduce the water requirement by the industry and reuse and recycle the wastewater after treatment. So this will also play a very important role in time to come. IIT Jodhpur, I would like to mention here, it is worthwhile to mention that we are providing our technical advice and consultancy to several organizations like Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation, Ministry of Jal Shakti, also Defense Research Development Organization, DRDO, and other organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Tiwari. We are open to questions from faculty members in the meeting.
Hello. Yeah, Professor
Yes.
Tiwari, this is Pradyut
Yeah.
from Mechanical Engineering Department.
Yes,
So, these are, you spoke about membrane technology.
Yeah.
So, there is one more technology called water still, like, you evaporate the water and then collect it.
Yeah.
So, what is the advantages and disadvantages of these two technologies when we compare?
Yeah. One is because it is based on physical separation and there is no phase change involved in the membrane processes. And in the evaporation process, thermal process, there is phase changes involved from liquid phase to vapor phase, then condensed. So
Right.
energy requirement is little higher in the thermal processes compared to the membrane processes. So that's
Right.
one of the things. Nonetheless, the quality of water which you get in the thermal processes is a distilled quality water. And here
Right.
you get the drinking quality water. So
Okay.
depending on what is the use of the water, the technology plays an important role. Nonetheless, if you can use waste heat, probably thermal
Waste heat, and
processes.
Rajasthan has huge amount of solar energy. I mean, when we look at it, so I mean, at least during the summer months. And the other question I had is, what you were telling me, that because of evaporation we get distilled water. So is it possible to convert this water into potable water? I mean, is it? I mean, what kind of processes are required to convert this distilled water into potable water?
I can suggest you a very important, like you can use hybrid process. Thermal process, you get the distilled quality water. Because you want to increase the TDS, take the brackish water which is already available in the land area, and through the ultrafiltration unit so that bacteria, virus are made out, but salinity is not reduced, mix that water here and make it potable quality water, increase the total dissolved solids. Hybrid
Okay.
process can be very, very lucrative in this case.
Okay. And for solar still, is it? I mean, the total amount of water that you get after this process, is it less compared to the membrane system?
If it's not less or more, not from that point of view, because depending on the type, quality of water, the scale causing constituents come into picture. So system is designed in a manner so that a scale formation doesn't take place because of the constituents present in water. And that decides which plant is to be operated at what level and what recovery is to be fixed. So it's basically a design considerations, then carry out the techno-economics and then look into it which goes better.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
All right. So thank you so much, Professor Tiwari. I would now request Professor Ram Prakash to commence with the talk on N95 mass decontamination.
Good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present on National Technology Day, the very recent and interesting work that has been done in a very short in-house project. And the title of my present is an advanced photocatalytic oxidation stabilization system based on UV light and metal oxide nanoparticle catalysts to treat N95 filter face masks respirator for reuse. The same concept can also be used for sterilization of other medical accessories being used by the doctors and COVID-19 patient handlers. So in fact, this was a 1 month project which has been assigned to us, and I would like to appreciate Director Saab for initiating this work. And this work initiated with this discussion with Dr. Indrajit Yadav, Jilla Panchayat Adhikari Jodhpur, and also I guess with the AIMS director. So the work was carried out by 4 departments: physics, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, bioscience, and bioengineering. And the interesting dates which I have mentioned, because you see that how fast this work has been done. So project discussion started on 25th March. And this was approved on 27th March. We received necessary items on 5th April. It was a great support from the administration of state government and also from our own institute. And lab testing of this first prototype was done till 14th April 2020 at ADJ. And this microbial testing was done at AIMS during 15th to 25th April. And by 7th May, we were able to transfer this technology to 5 industries across India. So there are different technologies which are there. Actually, there are 3 specific technologies people have been talking about for FFR disinfection. One is what we call the vapor hydrogen peroxide, and then ultraviolet germicidal irradiation. And then there is a moist heat that are used And these are as per the CDC recommendations of Government of India. And these are as per the infrastructure standards. Actually, UV light is one of the fastest method. However, the disinfection efficiency dependent on the dose, and hence the system optimization is very, very crucial in this case. So UV disinfection is effective against bacteria, viruses, and protozoa. It is very well known fact. And UV, this ranges in 4 areas: VUV 100 to 200 nanometer, UVC is from 200 to 80 nanometer, UVB 280 to 350 nanometer, UVA 315 to 400 nanometer. In fact, this UVC is the most lethal range as a germicidal disinfectant, and that is which is used for bacteria deactivation and viruses deactivations. So the key technological challenge which was there with us to develop a UV-based system in a portable, protective environment. There have been certain efforts. I will just speak about that, but I would like to just mention about what kind of UV lamps we have used. So there are mercury-based UV lamps. These are very popular in the market. So you can see in the figure on the left side, there are the filament-based lamps, and mercury amalgam is there. When these filaments are heated, mercury is vaporized. There are atomic transitions that used to happen, and when we are working at the low pressure, then only 254 nanometer wavelength is the peak germicidal. So the germicidal wavelength that comes out with this kind of lamp. And of course, there are lamps with the medium pressure and then medium pressure high output, where we can get multiple wavelengths. So we have used this specific lamp of 254 nanometer. It is commonly used in industry because these kind of high pressure lamps require higher power of operation. Of course, their germicidal efficiencies are higher. If you can see from this graph, actually, the UVC is from 200 to 80 nanometer, and this is the DNA absorption curve, basically. Even if you're at the higher side, we can get some deactivation, and the peak germicidal wavelength is 264 nanometer. Of course, at 254 nanometer also, we can get the deactivation of bacteria and viruses. So what exactly happens when UVC is falling onto DNA or RNA? Basically, it is the UVC is absorbed by the DNA and RNA bases. If you look, these are the strands actually, and there are nitrogenous bases, cytosine, genine, adenine, and thymine. When UV is absorbed, so when there are the two of the thymines, when they are nearby, so the energy which is there in the UVC range, which is around 3.6 to 3.69 electron volts, that is exactly the UVC range, and so this makes the carbonic bond breaking association and dissociation. So dissociation is there and association is there. When these two thymine dimers, they come closer and there is a kink actually. So there's a single photon, so this breaks. But DNA or RNA try to repair by itself, but when UV dose is sufficient, again and again hitting, and after that it does not repair by itself and it is damaged. So this is what exactly happens with the UV-based sources. The most interesting part of this UV is that this follows the law of reciprocity. In fact, what does it mean is that if I'm having a, suppose, a 1 milliwatt per centimeter square kind of UV light source, and if I'm running it for 200 seconds, I'm able to generate a UV dose of 200 millijoule per centimeter square. And the same level can also be achieved. Suppose I am having a 200 milliwatt per centimeter square kind of a source. If I am running it is for only just for 1 second, I can get the same level of UV dose. So the UV dose determines the log reduction actually. So when 3 log reduction means 1000 CFU per ml if the particles are there. 4 log is 10,000 CFU per ml are there. There are different kind of viruses, spores, and bacteria are there. And these are the kind of doses which are mentioned here. They are enlisted. So the COVID-19 is of a RNA-based virus, and it is a single-walled RNA-based virus. This is almost similar to MS2. So the kind of energy that is required for 4-log reduction, which is as a WHO standard, if we can achieve, even 3-log reduction, that is good enough. So these kind of energies that are needed for this is for 4-log reduction is around 71 millijoule. Whereas for this source, it is around 78 millijoule kind of energy that is needed. So there have been some people have already tried. There are a number of studies, and the CDC has fixed the dose for this F19 face mask respirator, and the dose should be around 1 joule per centimeter based on the earlier studies actually. So people have achieved on large number of influenza viruses. They have done even for SARS, COVID, and MERS, COVID, and all those things, and they could achieve 99.99. This is around 5-log reduction of bacteria and the viruses they could achieve. There has been further study which again shows on MS2 virus of this 1 joule per centimeter square kind of energy if one is producing, then one can get around 99% kind of deactivation. Of course, if one is producing very high dose, then the durability of this material reduces, and there have also been studies on by the UV light on this face mask respirator. So there is also a US-based one research institution. They have set up one room in which they are trying to fill, they are trying to create F95 face mask respirator FFR decontamination for use purposes in this in 2020. So, but there was no portable system available so far to do this entire business. So, what was our technological intervention of IIT Jodhpur? We developed an advanced photocatalytic oxidation sterilization system, and that was again based on UVC light of 254 nanometer. But of course, the interesting part that we have added in the metal oxide nanoparticle catalyst with a new geometric design to eliminate the microorganisms, including viruses, and also other suspended particles, including VOCs. In fact, if you look in these face masks, sometimes the VOC can also, actually there was the doctor, Abe's doctor, he was saying that if these pores are blocked by the VOCs, then we have to check that after cleaning, the pores should also be opened. And this was not possible with the pure UV, in fact. So that is what we did an additional component into this. And you can see this is a very interesting geometry we have worked out. And we have put out a UV sensor in between to measure the intensity, that the requisite intensity, whether we are able to get or not. So this is what we did. So the key advantages are as following. Distance plays a critical role in UV light in efficacy. So as we are moving twice the distance, the UVC light becomes 1/4 of its power with respect to the original position. So this relationship basically limits how far a single source of UV can be used. So to mitigate this issue, what we have done, we have used these bipolar lantern UV light assemblies. This is what our component into this has, in combination with TiO2 metal oxides. So what this TiO2 metal oxide is doing, actually the UV doses does not penetrate well into the organic materials. So if you're having like a blockage due to certain things, so when we talk about like the sanitization, when we talk about sanitization, we have to remove those blockades also. So that is coming through a chemical process, and people are using different ethylene oxide or hydrogen peroxides and like this. But this TiO2 coating, what exactly it is doing, it is able to generate active oxygen, hydrogen peroxide, and also electron hole pairs to reduce the negative and positive ions in the treatment environment. So this produces negative and positive ions in the treatment environment. And this process can remove even to the VOCs and even whatever suspended particles are there in the system. And there is another interesting part that the shadowing effect is another issue with the UV. If there is because the light travels in the straight line, so shadow areas are typically dealt with by moving UV light sources during the treatment process. So when we are having a room-like structure, we can move these UV lamps and we can avoid the shadowing effect. But in this development of our advanced system, there are these negative ions of hydrogen atom and hydroxyl radicals which are producing. They can even wall rupture the viruses, and therefore the proposed methodology can be more effective for virus inactivation process, even without the movement of UV light assemblies in the portable geometry. That is another added feature of this. You can remove odors. Actually, you know, these hydroxyl radicals are known as a natural detergent. So once they are produced, they can even, if there are any carbonic compound gases, they can also be removed. TiO2 nanoparticle catalyst coating on a larger surface area, that was a additional outcome of this research. We could be able to create this kind of coating of approximately 1 feet by 0.5 feet kind of metal sheets of aluminum. And the process coating, a process was developed for this coating, and the optimization has been achieved with a fast process, and we were able to achieve uniform stable coating in a very shorter time. So this also has a control system and is enabled with the semi-automated operation. The system is able to operate at 3.2 milliwatt per centimeter at the central location in the system. And based on this, that operational time, we can produce the energy at 2.5 minutes is more than 418 millijoule per centimeter square. In 5 minutes, we are able to produce around more than 960 millijoule per centimeter square. And 7.5, it is 1440 millijoule per centimeter square. So around 5 minutes, we are able to achieve what exactly internationally people have done in their studies. And we did the test, and we could find within around 5 minutes of operation, we were able to achieve the desired results. So testing has been done at the AIIMS Jodhpur. What they did is they have taken spores basically. They treated, because you can see the spores deactivation. I was already shown the earlier studies. Spores deactivation is if spores is killed, means all sorts of bacteria and viruses are killed. So this is a dose related to the E. coli bacteria. You can see there are the different kind of rotavirus even that has been. So the kind of energy that is required for the rotavirus is this much, but for the spores it is high. So once that kind of the spores is killed, means like it can be assumed that yes, coronavirus won't be there. This is what they have produced the results, and they optimize and by their source in our optimized system, 10 to the power 4 spores contained specimen tubes of biological incubator samples were used, and complete deactivation of this GS spore was with 5 log reduction was achieved in around 5 minutes of exposure time. They have been given a certificate also for this, and this is around in 5 minute exposure time. There has been a 2.5 minutes of delay. Startup time is there with the UV lamps because these are heated. They are heated by filaments basically. So the technology now has been transferred on 7th of May to these 5 companies: Ascon Surgical Limited, Jodhpur, Rajasthan; Chemtech Associate Private Limited, Jaipur, Rajasthan; Johari Digital Healthcare Limited, Jodhpur; and Chempharm Industries India Private Limited, Sonipat. Actually, these companies, even the Jodhpur companies, are quite bigger companies, and this Chempharm is also in this field. This is quite a big company. They have been dealing with this kind of work already. So then there is a Parapati Technology Private Limited from Kerala. So this technology has been transferred, and I could see some of the today news in Rajasthan Patrika that this technology has been transferred to industries. So I would like to acknowledge the key contributors, and particularly I would like to thank this to Director Professor Risa for his kind guidance. He is his mentor. He is our mentor, and Professor S. is mentor, and Gustav is there, Dean R&D, and then core faculty team from all 4 departments. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Deepak Fulwani, Dr. Ambesh Dikshit, Dr. Ankur Gupta, and Dr. Shankar Manoharan, and technical staff, Mr. Ravi Jangid, Junior Technical Assistant from Mechanical Engineering Department, Mr. Dhaval Rayani, he is also Junior Technical Assistant from Mechanical Engineering. He has contributed significantly. The core team member would also like to acknowledge Dr. V. Narayanan. He was in part of studying the UV lamps, and Dr. Neha Jain, Dr. Kausalya Desai, Dr. Shri Visa for their moral and support and help during the execution of this in-house project. Thanks are also due to the student participants. I would like to mention the name of Mr. Shivam Chaturvedi, Mr. Rajnish Chaurashia, and Mr. Kuldeep Kashwan. He is the project staff from the Department of Physics, and Mr. Ram Manohar Rao, he is also project staff from the Department of Electrical Engineering. And also, I would like to express my thankfulness to administrative staff, especially Amardeep Sarmaji. He has been a great help actually during this period, and also Shakti Ranjan Patraji and Mr. Pran Govindasaki for their timely and efficient process. So thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Ramprakash. We are open to questions.
Hello, Professor Ram. Can you hear me? It's Deepak here from Chemical Engineering.
Yeah, please.
So, Professor Ram, you mentioned about the role of titanium oxide. Can you please share some details on it, the role of titanium oxide in this technology?
Actually, when UV is falling onto this titanium dioxide coated plates, so this is generating negative and positive ions basically. So there are in this process, what you can get is you can get the moisture of air is used, and hydroxyl radicals are produced. So these hydroxyl radicals, which negative ions, are known as a natural detergent, and these natural detergent actually they help in multiple ways, and also there are also production of hydrogen peroxide. So due to this, so it becomes a kind of a hybrid process where you can have a kind of a wet chemical process along with UV. That is what exactly has happened in this.
Okay, and is all these hydroxide ions and hydroxide peroxide, are they generated because of the moisture present?
Because this hydrogen has to be taken from the environment only. Otherwise, it is difficult. Yes.
From the environment. Okay. And the second follow-up question was, you mentioned about certain studies at AIIMS.
Yes.
Yes. So over there, did you by any chance measure the let's say reduction in viral activities for any viruses such which are part of corona family?
Actually, there have been the debates there also in AIIMS, and they are even preparing things, and they are going to do this virology test also soon. Actually. Okay. So I think they are in the process. But as per the standard with this spouse, when they could see that kind of results, they are dead assured that yes, this would do the job.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
All right. So thank you, Dr. Ramprakash. I would now request Dr. Sumit Kalra to tell us about his telemedicine portal.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to present our work on the next-gen smart telemedicine portal, which we have done in the light of COVID-19 when most of the OPDs are closed in hospitals. Many of the patients were finding it difficult to contact doctors. Even doctors were also not comfortable coming into direct contact with the patients. So this telemedicine portal can be very helpful. So through this portal, patients can interact with doctors remotely, either through means of chat or audio-video conversation, or by sharing their reports in form of images. They can use either smartphone or laptop using internet connectivity. to contact doctors. So some stats, we have 40 plus doctors on our portal. They have various expertise, like many of them are general physician, cardiologist, gynecopedia and all. Till now, more than 200 patients have visited the portal and contacted the doctors. Doctors has also responded them. In total, we have 3,500, more than 3,500 visits. And the system is quite lightweight. We are having less than 10% of computing resource consumption at any point of time. So some of the existing features are patient and doctors can interact using text, audio, video, and images. Whenever a patient comes online and try to connect to a doctor, doctor receives an email alert. And if doctor comes online and patient is offline, so patient also receives an email alert saying that your doctor is online. And it's like similar to WhatsApp chat service. Doctors and patient can respond to each other in offline manner also. And patients can upload their reports or X-ray images captured through smartphone and all. And doctors can share their handwritten prescription with the patients. And it also facilitates referrals to other doctors within the same hospital. So if a doctor feels that the case is not lying in his or her area, they can always refer. And whenever a patient revisits the portal, it takes out the complete history of the patient and to show the doctors and patient as well. The interface is mobile friendly, so even with the lower internet bandwidth, people can use this portal. It has some set of questions which it asks in the beginning to patients so that the data is readily available to doctors. And it also collects the patient's location, which we are going to use in future for identifying the nearest hospital and locality. Then we also support multiple languages, Hindi, English, and the system is quite lightweight and scalable in terms of system performance. And the work is not finished yet, we are still working. So some of the upcoming features are, we are working on some point of care devices which can be integrated with this telemedicine portal. These point of care devices can help us in measuring the patient's vital body parameter without coming into their physical contacts. Some of the parameters right now we are looking at the tracheal sound, body temperature, blood oxygen level, heart rate and heart sound, lung sound and respiration rate. And we are looking at the various technologies and mechanisms to measure these parameters using low-cost sensors or smartphone-based sensors. And we are also looking at the AI mechanisms to remove the noise and increase the accuracy of these low-cost sensor parameters. So I'll just quickly go through the portals, how it does work. There's a home page, a doctor or a patient need not to log in. Because we can see that patient, whenever they are contacting, they may not be in condition to log in. So there's only login for doctors. After login, patient can see the doctor can see the list of patients. They can start the chat with the individual patients. They can see some initial details like location and the various questions, answers given by the patients. The moment doctor clicks on chat, it can see the patient's history, what all answers they have given. And they can also see the previous session history by scrolling up. It's from patient side. How does it look like from patient side? Whenever doctor connects to a patient, patient can see that a doctor has been connected to its chat, and now they can start talking to the doctor. And within the hospital, we can refer the case from one doctor to another doctor. And at the same time, we can use options like video, audio, and images to interact with the patients. It's a snapshot of video call, like the self video will be looking at the bottom right corner, and the patient screen is visible. And this video has been captured while it was using the mobile data from the both side, doctors as well as patient side. And images can be also stored within the chat history. So reports and doctor's handwritten prescription can be uploaded in the chat history in form of images. And at the same time, you can see at the right side, we are showing the live records of the COVID figures within India. And at patient side, it first takes the disclaimer whether they really want to consult with doctors or not. And if they want to consult, then they can choose the doctor from the drop-down menu. After that, there are some initial details, the profile details. Then we have two options. One is OPD consultancy, second is COVID-19 consultancy. If a patient picks COVID-19 consultancy, there are few basic questions we ask, like you must have seen other basic questions like whether you have traveled in past 14 days or you have come in the direct contact with the COVID-19 suspect and all. If patient opt for OPD, then we ask what kind of symptoms are there and how many days you are suffering from, and then whether you are ready to consult doctor or not. Once a patient gives consent, we search for the appropriate doctor from the chosen hospital list and then refer to the doctor. So that is the whole workflow of the portal. And I'm happy to share that this portal is already live and being used within IIT Jodhpur PHC. And our team details are Director sir, he has mentored us how to go about the portal at every stage. And then there are a couple of students at different level, UG, PhD and intern. They're also working on different aspects. And from AIIMS Jodhpur side, we had taken suggestions from Dr. Kuldeep Singh, who shared MCI guidelines with us to develop this technical portal. And Dr. Nishay Nagori from AIIMS MBBS, he helped us in bringing many of the doctors on the portal. And out of 40 doctors, I will say more than 90% doctors promptly respond to the patient's queries. And I would like to give special thanks to NP Bridge team, who initially sponsored us and provided us with the Amazon Web Service machines, where the current portal is hosted. And Mr. Ravi Mula has given us technical support time to time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumit. We are open to questions.
We are also looking to extend our team. So if any of you have suggestions or can contribute in this solution, making it really the smart portal, you are always welcome.
So we have a question on chat which says, how will it work in rural areas? Yeah.
So in rural areas, see, basic requirement for telemedicine portal is there has to be some internet connectivity. But like I already mentioned, the portal is quite lightweight and mobile device friendly. So many of the time the audio chat option and the image uploading option works even with the lower bandwidth. And video option also is mobile friendly, so it will not consume the much of the bandwidth. So at rural area it should work. Moreover, in addition, we are working on a scheme where we can include the PHCs from rural areas. So rural patients can contact to their rural PHCs in their areas using the portal. So they need not to visit the PHC physically. So we are reducing the direct physical contact between patients and doctors given the COVID situation.
All right, there's another question from the same student asking how can an illiterate person avail this service?
Like the chat, if people is able to use WhatsApp or any other chat service, it doesn't matter whatever language they are using, English alphabets or Hindi alphabets, until unless they can communicate in writing, they can use it. And illiterate people may require some assistance to start the chat, but using audio option, they can speak out, they can interact with the doctors. Like in most of the rural areas, we have ASHA workers. They are generally trained to interact with the patients and doctors, and they can facilitate this portal to the illiterate person.
Thank you. There's another question from Dharmendra. He's an MTech student. Is this for Pan India or only for Rajasthan?
The portal as such is live and hosted on www World Wide Web. So anybody can essentially access this portal from anywhere. In fact, we have a few doctors from Haryana and Punjab, and the patients are coming all over the India on the portal to contact those doctors. But officially, the portal is working for IIT Jodhpur PSC, where Dr. Ronika Yadav is handling the patients from IIT Jodhpur fraternity. But the portal is open to Rajasthan, India, as well as the whole world.
Thank you so much, Sumit. This has been very helpful. Thank you. We'll move on. And our next speaker is Professor Mayank Vats from the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. Requesting Professor Vats to take over, please.
Okay, so thanks Rajlakshmi for inviting me on this session. So here I'm actually representing a team of faculty members and students who are for the last 1 month, maybe actually a little over 1 month, working on COVID-19 screening and prognosis using chest X-ray images. And the list of students, mostly PhD students and some undergrad students, are mentioned over here. The faculty team involves Professor Rajan Nagar, Deepak Mishra, Anil Tiwari, Richa Singh, myself, and Professor Shantanu Chaudhary. So in this particular work, the motivation started about in the month of like around end of March, when we started looking at it that in India we have a shortage of these PCR test kits, or even rapid PCR test kits. When we look at the size of the country and the diversity of the population and reach in different parts of the country, these tests are actually time-consuming and costly. So while cost is one factor, but time is a major factor in this kind of scenario, when the rate of this growth in terms of patient count increases exponentially. It is important that can we screen anyone who has symptoms related to COVID-19. And as the name of COVID-19 suggests, that those who don't know, it's the actual name is Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2, or SARS-CoV-2. So this is a respiratory syndrome, respiratory disease which affects the lungs. Now, can we look at the lung X-rays and then identify if we can find out some of the spots which are showcasing the signs of or early signs of this disease, or at least the progression of the disease can also help us in understanding the prognosis factors. So the key question that we asked around end of March was that can we use X-rays as a fast and cost-effective methods for COVID-19 screening, and then later on we expanded for prognosis. So just to quickly give you an overview of what we are trying to do is, So if you look at these three X-rays are actually coming from healthy people. Means at least the lungs are actually healthy. There may be other diseases because of which they had to undergo X-rays, probably fracture or some of those things, but the lungs are medically notified as that these are healthy lungs. Now, if you look at the COVID-19 lungs, and in these two examples, if you see, doctor has also annotated the regions which are affected and which has the patches which show that these lungs are severely affected. Now, I'll just quickly go back to the previous slide to show you the difference. This is in these three examples, you see one can visualize even the end lines of the lung, how it is starting, and these are obviously if you go to if you have gone for a chest X-ray anytime, doctors would have or the technician would ask that take a deep breath, hold the breath, and then they capture. And if everything is fine, then you see these kinds of X-rays where the whenever there is an air over there, it's black, and anything which is not air, then they take some color, like grayscale color. Now, the regions like ribs and all, they are not essentially air, and that's why you see those are towards the whiter side, and the air regions are mostly on the black side. Now, if you observe these two X-rays, with this information, if you see these patients, the lungs have mostly non-air information, right? So here it's mostly looks like washed out, but actually the lungs are essentially filled with fluid, and therefore X-ray has not been able to penetrate properly, and the visualization shows that, and then the doctor's annotation also actually shows that these X-rays or these lungs are heavily affected. So this particular example clearly articulates that if we have a patient on COVID-19, and if the patient is showcasing the symptoms related to respiratory problems, then can we use AI algorithms or pattern matching algorithms to find out which are there any regions which are affected? Are there patches which we are observable? Are there opaque regions which these pattern matching algorithms or pattern detection algorithm can detect? And then it can be used as a screening mechanism. While in many cases, which are asymptomatic cases, we may not find any of those challenges, but the cases which require continuous monitoring would essentially this chest X-rays can provide a faster mechanism for detecting and then looking at the progression of the disease also. So therefore, we embarked on two different threads. One was chest X-ray for screening purpose and chest X-rays for prognosis purpose, particularly like how disease is progressing on different days, whether the patient needs a ventilator or not. If the disease is progressing, let's say from day 2 to day 5, then looking at the pattern that it is growing, we can predict whether there is what kind of treatment is required, whether the treatment is helping the patient or not, and so on and so forth. So that's part of the prognosis. So first, I'll quickly talk about the diagnostic or screening research. You may have already heard a lot of news from different researchers which talk about using X-rays for detecting COVID-19 disease. So just a quick side note, COVID-19 radiologically cannot be classified. It's a radiologist, as we understand, would classify it, would actually first give these features, would provide the region of interest and provide actually the series of features, and then based on those features only, then a radiologist would suggest that there may be a COVID symptoms, and our correlation with respect to the clinical data or clinical symptoms can be combined to finally put it as a classification of COVID-19. However, from machine learning perspective, end of the day, we have to also look at what are the labels associated to a chest X-ray. So based on different features which are there, which a COVID-19 patient chest X-ray may exhibit, we can label them that if these features are available, we can call them as COVID class. And if these features are not available, we can class them as a non-COVID class. So this is the traditional approach in which people have generally, researchers have generally treated this as a two-class problem, COVID and non-COVID. Some researchers have also extended it to COVID, healthy, and other disease classes. In place of 2 class, it's a 3-class problem. And different kinds of deep learning architecture, starting with ResNet 50, AlexNet, MobileNet, InceptionNet, even DenseNet 121. Many such deep learning architectures and models are now available. But the problem generally in these models, even some of the source code, open source code models that are there, what we observed was that these models are considered like we can consider them as a black box model. We really do not know why actually this deep learning architecture has given 95% accuracy. So therefore, they are not explainable. Some people have actually shown a visualization in terms of activation map or GradCam visualization. But again, when a radiologist would actually look at it, if a chest expert look at it, they may not actually say that, because this is a GradCam explanation, I'm going to look at it, but they would like to see which patches are there. Can we mark them in the way that they have annotated, as I've shown in the previous example, which are marked by the chest expert. The other important factor is, and this is like an oversight, I wouldn't say oversight, but maybe the data limitation problem. Generally, these models are trained on very small sample set and tested on maybe 30 to 50 samples. Now, if someone, or even 100 samples, right? So if someone is claiming 95% accuracy on 100 samples or 50 samples, as a machine learning expert, as an AI researcher, I would be a little careful, right? So therefore, it is important that we need to go back and look at, see, can we get more data? Can we evaluate on a larger population set? And can we try to explain the approach? Can we try to explain our decisions, that why we have reached this particular decision, rather than just saying that this is a COVID class or a healthy class or a non-COVID class, right? And then the final thing is that when we take X-rays, there are 2 different views, generally like popular views. One is PA views, and another is AP view. So if you're taking an X-ray from front, like when the plate is touching your X-ray, that's PA view, and when the plate is touching your back, and so if a patient is lying down and the plate can be put in, which is touching your back, that is AP view. So these are essentially 2 different kinds of way of capturing lung X-rays, and these existing models have generally not taking care of these variations in the capture modality. So what we are proposing and since this is we want to share this with the IIT Jaipur community, what we are proposing is an explainable model in which we have looked at it as a multitask approach. We are doing lung segmentation, we are doing disease segmentation. We are trying to mimic how a chest expert or a radiologist would annotate the region of interest or the regions which are the lung region which are getting affected, and giving this as a feedback to the our classifier, and even on our classification scheme also we have looked at in 3 different ways: healthy and healthy, COVID, non-COVID, and other disease. And so other and non-other means whether other and non-COVID is one kind of class. So you can look at a nice mesh of different classes that one can create. So, and our target is that if there is a COVID patient, we should not classify that COVID patient as healthy non-COVID. Given these 6 labels, we can have multiple combinations. What we want, if a COVID patient comes in, we should classify him or her as COVID unhealthy. We should not classify that particular person as non-COVID and healthy. Right, so this means we need to classify any given input image which has COVID and COVID symptoms. Then COVID and unhealthy classes should get triggered. And as an output, we also need to look at all the regions which the deep learning model looks at, and then the decision is based on those regions. So we have used more than 11,000 images for training, and also includes more than 400 COVID cases. And with this relatively larger data set compared to the existing research, we have obtained more than 99% COVID detection accuracy. So we have only 3 or 4 cases which we are able to miss, 4 cases. And that too, when we look at these examples, these X-rays, while they are early stage of COVID, when chest X-ray may not have picked up those symptoms, while the PCR test may have said COVID-19, but the chest X-ray, the disease may not have spread till chest, so that the X-ray could have picked up those symptoms. These are some of the results in comparison with different algorithms to showcase that our model, one can look at our model and visualize that the results are making sense, at least to us, as well as we are also sending these results to different doctors to see if they are means whether they can justify our results. And the disease segmentation also we are performing, and in comparison with the existing algorithms, if you can observe, the last row is the proposed one. We are very much close to what the ground truth is. So this is one approach where we are very close to now converting this into probably either as a service, or collaborating with some other companies or service providers who can take this to the next level. And parallelly, we are also trying to discuss with the doctors who can give us feedback, and that would also help us in improving our approach. And as I said, like earlier, we were talking about, while the screening is one part, can we use X-rays for prognosis purposes? So when a patient actually joins, when a patient actually comes to hospital, and we admit the patient, at some intervals, these different tests actually have to be performed to see that means what, or different kinds of tests have to be performed to see how the disease is progressing. Now, can we use all the parameters such as blood oxygen level? Can we use body temperature, heart rate, clinical data, along with X-rays, or in some cases even CT scan data, at different timestamps from day 1 to nth day, and give them all of this information into a deep learning or AI model or machine learning model to learn the information, and append this knowledge from the case studies or research papers which are available. From there, we extract the knowledge and we extract the representation from these research papers or the case studies, and use them as priors in a graphical model. And the output expected of this multimodal prognosis approach is, can we predict the severity level? Can we predict whether a person need a ventilator maybe after 2 days, after 3 days? Can we make such predictions so that the hospital administration is upfront ready for providing the best care possible? Can we also predict comorbidity analysis? Or can we perform that analysis to, in this particular approach, if a patient has any other disease, such as any heart disease or any existing lung disease, can we look at all that additional information and suggest that in this particular scenario, what would be the treatment effectiveness, how actually we need to provide a personalized treatment. So that's the whole objective of this particular AI/ML prognosis model, multimodal prognosis model. As another project that which we are doing, and again, this is a little early stage project. We have worked a lot on face recognition in our career. Means at least I have worked a lot with my students and collaborators. But the true usage of face recognition right now is when people are wearing different kinds of masks. And fortunately, our Prime Minister is taking the lead in this, where he is using Make in India masks or the masks which are more popular in India, the kind of things which we already use, whether it's winters or summers, we use it. And then he's making a bold statement that we can use whatever which belongs to our culture, and use them as face mask to fight against COVID-19. And however, if you talk about face recognition, or for that matter any biometrics, now we need to perform identity recognition at a distance in a touchless fashion. Face recognition is one of the best modalities for touchless recognition, touchless identity matching. However, with this kind of face mask, how we can perform this task is a research challenge. And prior to COVID-19 scenario, this research was never picked up. While we have worked a lot on occlusion, these kinds of variations, these kinds of texture, which are cloth-based texture and variations, may actually create challenges for face recognition tasks. And this kind of research would be particularly applicable because as we go along, as we move forward, people will be hesitant in touching fingerprint surface. So anything which is touch-based identity measure, for at least for the next few months to years, it will be a challenge to use such devices. However, face recognition can be used, but the algorithms have to be updated with respect to the presence of facial masks. So this is what this research group is doing, and we are open for ideas, and we are open for research discussions. If you have any, and the floor is open for questions.
Okay, if you have any questions which you think of after the session is over, please just drop an email. So on that note, I want to thank Professor Watts. In fact, I thank all the members who are present today, who presented in the panel. Thank you so much for this amazing, outstanding contribution that you've made during this trying time. And also thank you for taking out the time to share it with us today. Thank you again. And on that note, I would request our director, Professor Chaudhary, to please share a few words. Thank you so much, Professor Watts.
Thank you for organizing this seminar on Technology Day. I listened to the talks, and these talks really represent a kind of a glimpse of some of these activities which are happening at IIT Jodhpur, responding to this challenge of COVID-19. But beyond these there are other activities which are happening in the institute, and we are actually trying to respond to the challenge put across by the current scenario. In fact, this threat of COVID is also an opportunity for the scientists. In fact, the point which is being talked about at everywhere is that this is possibly first time in a political circle in our lifetime when the value of science is being really realized and felt. And scientists or engineers as a whole, as a team, has actually responded to this crisis in an exemplary fashion. And across the country, there are huge innovations which has come up in very short time. And in fact, this could be possibly compared only with what happened during World War II. That is, the whole, the technology profile changed. If you go back and remember about World War II, as an electronics engineer, I would say the transistor came because of World War II. And which may not be very positive, but this entire nuclear energy, the ability to harness nuclear energy that also established by during World War II. And these are two very significant engineering events which got accelerated and happened because of World War II. In fact, COVID is actually putting that kind of a challenge with us. And since this entire, the so-called political power, political and financial power, they're realizing that without science, now this crisis cannot be met. Without engineering, this crisis cannot be met. So that's why the role of engineers and scientists have become extremely critical in this context. And really, it's very heartening to see that at IIT Jodhpur, there has been a very significant effort to meet this challenge. In fact, this challenge has also led to technology developed at IIT Jodhpur licensed to 5 entrepreneurs, 5 MSMEs. And even now we are getting everyday mails asking for licensing out that technology, which actually shows also power of IIT Jodhpur faculty and their ability to generate technologies which has got acceptance in the industry. So this occasion has given us an opportunity to look back into our capability, to project our capability to the students, because I would also take this opportunity to congratulate all the students who have actively participated in this activity. It is not that the students who are in the campus are participating into it, but also the students who are not in the campus, they're remotely working to make our endeavor or research efforts in the area of COVID-19 successful. The another point I would also like to mention and indicate that IIT Jodhpur is also coordinating an initiative of DST, Government of India, for using AI to handle COVID challenges. This program is called Rakshak. And in this program, the key feature of this program, in fact, unique feature of this program is this is creating a platform and has created a platform in which industry, research labs, academic institutions, startups, venture capitalists, all have come together to actually get technologies developed, translated, scaled up, and deployed. And that too, the target is within 1 year to have an impact in the national space, handling not only the problem of health related to COVID, but also economic problems, industrial problems, problems of MSME, which are getting generated because of COVID. So in this whole endeavor, IIT Jodhpur is expected to play a significant role. And every one of us has to put in their best effort, best scientific effort to achieve result. And this also is a point to remember that growth of science and technology is not just for just publishing papers. Our activities, academic activities, is not just for publishing papers, but also very important is to generate technologies which can meet the requirements of common man. I think Technology Day has again brought back this message to us during these days of COVID-19. And this is actually for the students also to keep in mind that an IIT is a community of faculty, students, and staff who together responds to these challenges of technology development. And IIT Jodhpur is actively moving on this path and therefore contributing to fundamental research, contributing to research which can translate it to technology, and technology which can be actually deployed. So Technology Day has brought this promise to all of us, or brought this possibility to all of us, and we should work together to take this chance and opportunity in this difficult time in full throttle, as a full throttle engine, and push it forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It has been great to have this meeting, meeting everyone. I thank everyone for joining us, and I now invite Professor Kamaljeet Rangra, the Chairman of Committee for Celebration of Commemorative Days, CCCD, for a vote of thanks.
Good evening, and thank you for joining the panel discussions showcasing the contributions of our institute against the COVID-19 pandemic. The importance of National Technology Day will perhaps never be more relevant than during this time of global crisis, where nation is looking for technologies, be it the cutting-edge technology for vaccines, or personal protective kit, or diagnostic tools, or sanitation tools, or other gadgets which empower the medical fraternity and the common man. We are proud of innovators from IIT Jodhpur, the students, the staff, the faculty who responded to the call over a very short time and with very limited resources. Congratulations to them. We are thankful to our director, Mr. Shantanu Chaudhary, the force behind it. We are also thankful to him for his address and for his untiring efforts to stimulate and guide the technology development relevant to the society during this difficult period. We are thankful to our panelists, who are also our contributors and innovators, for sharing their ideas online. We hope to have more of such technologies emerging from IIT Jodhpur in the future. We are also thankful to our computer center team for providing the communication platform. We are thankful to students for joining in and having the questions. Typically, after this, we say refreshments are outside. This time they have been home delivered, and they are in your kitchen. Please enjoy your success. Thank you.
With that, we conclude the event today. Thank you all so much for joining us. Our students watching at home, we hope you enjoyed this session. Have a great day ahead. Stay safe. Thank you.